Welcome. Can I have the Deputy Mayor, would you mind reading the land acknowledgement, please?
Sure. I would like to acknowledge Wolfo is situated in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and as such ask we conduct our business with the 7 sacred teachings in mind: truth, honesty, love, courage, respect, wisdom, and humility.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, please. Thank you. I have second. Thank you. Councillor Van Niekerk and Councillor Elliott. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, that is carried. And we have the minutes from the Planning Advisory Committee meeting of April 10th, 2025. Anyone who was here?
I will move the Planning Advisory Committee meetings of April the 10th, 2025.
Be approved. Thank you.
Be approved, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Van Niekerk. Seconded. Any errors or omissions? Anyone online? I can't see them, so I'm assuming no. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, that too is carried. Thank you. And moving along to public input and question period. I think I'll read the rules. I think that's our new way of doing things. Our public participation is limited to 30 minutes. Each person is limited to 3 minutes and may return to speak for 1 minute if time permits, to the total of 30-minute period. Questions or comments are to be directed to the chair, and comments and questions that relate to personnel, current or potential legal litigation issues or planning issues for which a public hearing has already occurred, but no decision has been made by council will not be answered. Do we have anyone for public input? Yeah, come on up to the mic, say your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Laura Flaherty. I live at 1017 Ridge Road, so just outside of town. I'm a registered professional planner. I'm on the non-market housing working group. So I just wanted to actually come tonight to show my support for the great work that your staff and your consultant have done in the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan. I work for a municipality remotely from here in Ontario. So I actually work for the city of Kingston and in the planning department. And I write housing policy. It's what I do every single day. I wrote the city of Kingston zoning bylaw, so similar to the land use bylaw. I'm currently writing a brand new official plan for the city, so it's similar to a municipal planning strategy, and implemented our Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives over the summer this year. So I did just want to commend the work that your staff have done.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Love positive feedback. Wonderful. Anyone else want to say anything? Do we have anyone online, Devin?
That I know of.
Thank you. And moving along then, new business. We have a presentation from our consultants on the Housing Accelerator Fund action plan and implementation framework. So Director Lake, are you going to walk us through that, or is that Happy Cities?
I am not.
Okay.
Tristan is here for Happy Cities, and I'm just going to turn it over to Tristan, but he may take this. Thank you. Now, I have been, in theory, allotted 20 minutes. I've told that I can abuse that slightly. But
We'll do that.
Going to try to stick to that as best I can. There's an awful lot to get through. So please forgive me if it seems like I'm rushing a little bit through some sections. I'll try to be concise, but to tell you everything you need to know. So first of all, this is a collaboration between multiple really wonderful local consulting firms, each with our expertise. We focused on downtown, Fathom on neighborhoods, Turner Drake on economics, and ZAP is helping with non-market housing. So first, a little bit on motivation, just as a reminder, and I know you all know this, but Wolfville's growth rate, almost 2%, is larger than Nova Scotia's as a whole and larger than Halifax's. The amount of people in the community who struggle to afford their housing is 30%, and for renters, that's fully 40%. So there's a really big issue that needs to be tackled here. There's also a mismatch between the housing stock and housing needs. So 20% of households have 3 or more people, but 40% of houses have 3 or more bedrooms. And the current growth projections from Turner Drake suggest that this is actually going to be a growing problem, that the number of elderly people, students, and first-time homebuyers growing, the demand for smaller units is going to grow, and the demand for these very, very large single-family homes is going to decrease. So there's a need to provide more of these smaller units that can meet where the market is going. And at the moment, the market in Wolfville basically offers you 2 things, so you better like them. It's either a single-family home or apartments. So there's really a lack of options, a variety to meet the many, many needs that are in the market. Things like townhouses and duplexes that provide people that ground floor experience, but are a bit smaller, courtyard houses, much more. There's everything in between is largely currently missing. So Wolfville has been doing a lot of really wonderful work. We're not starting from zero with this project at all. The municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw were recently updated, the award-winning projects. So we're just making adjustments to build on this great existing work. And there's also an enormous amount of development that is coming, that is on the books. So all of these yellow properties are in the process of having proposals put forward, and the green and purple dots are projects that might happen within the next 2 years or so. Now, you'll notice that a lot of that new development is happening on opportunity sites around the periphery of the town. There's less that's happening in the downtown. And some of you might remember last time we showed you maps of other communities showing that downtowns really generate by far the greatest amount of tax revenue per square meter. Well, Turner Drake ran the numbers for Wolfville and found that, no surprise, the downtown really punches above its weight in terms of how much tax revenue it generates per square meter. So more than twice as much than the next most lucrative zone. So the downtown is 1.5% of the municipality's land area, but generates roughly 14% of its tax revenue, excluding a few special cases. So growing in the downtown is critical to growing the town's wealth, its ability to provide, to keep building pipes, maintain pipes, prepare for floods, improve quality of life, invest in parks, etc. A part of this plan is, in fact, to improve asset management for the community, so that the community knows how much its needs are going to cost, and to make sure that it's growing fast enough to have the revenue to cover those costs, things like flood risk, etc. And one reason why it's important to grow in the core in this compact mixed use way is because it leads to higher tax revenue, which is on top in this little diagram. It also lowers costs for residents because the more people can walk or bike to local jobs or shops, the less they're spending on driving or needing a car. And having more people living on existing infrastructure lowers the infrastructure cost per person, is the most cost-effective way to grow so that the community becomes more wealthy over time, not less. So let's get into the plan review, what we're suggesting today. And just as a reminder, everything at this stage are ideas for feedback. Nothing we're saying today is we're going to do this. This is just, here are ideas. We think they make sense, but in some cases we'd be offering a range of ideas for your feedback on that spread. So starting with the downtown, how can we bring that downtown growth that's going to generate that revenue? The first thing we suggest is, funnily enough, to protect what's there, because we need to preserve the reason why people want to invest here, right? And so we're 2 broad ideas for how to do that. One is to set a max lot frontage for properties within the area in the dotted line, so an area on Main Street. The motivation here being, what people love about the Main Street isn't always necessarily the individual buildings, though they are lovely, but the diversity of the buildings. The feedback we heard is that people like the funkiness, the organic character, and that's what you achieve with small lots with many, many buildings. If we replaced all of Main Street with modern style buildings, you would have about 12 buildings on the entire street. So you just lose that diversity. And also if we set a limit on lot frontage, you can still have development. It's just not going to be at the speed or scale that you might if you were going all in on, demolish whatever you want and build whatever you want. A second approach is saying, well, actually, what if it's those individual buildings that we value? So one approach here would be just to designate more buildings, see if there's more buildings that are worthy of heritage protection. Another approach is to take a few buildings and reduce the height limits on those specific buildings to say we as a town, we don't have an interest in development happening here. Or perhaps most fair and effective is to combine that with incentives to say, if you're going to develop here, you have to preserve the frontage, or you can't rebuild this building, but we're going to let you have those units somewhere else so that you maintain this unit that we're saying is valuable to the main street. So these are ideas. Idea 2 is to encourage growth on key lots. So there's parking lots and missing teeth, especially on Front Street, but also sections of Main Street where we really heard feedback, that we want to encourage new growth here to redefine somewhere like Front Street and make it feel more like part of the downtown. So the light blue is government-owned land where we're saying, let's invest there and build new public spaces and buildings that can make these better streets. The purple, we're saying, let's reinvest in the parking lots. Let's see if we can find a better use for those parking lots. And the green, we're saying, let's redevelop those properties in full. So here's parking lots where we want to encourage growth. We're suggesting a place like the pharmacy. It would be nice to have 2 or 3 or more story buildings on Main Street rather than a 1-story building with a large parking lot. So we're encouraging redevelopment there. And we heard from PAC members that they supported redeveloping this area by the waterfront. Maybe this is a good location for restaurants that are really taking advantage of that waterfront. One tool for incentivizing redevelopment is something called Bill 177 from the province, which allows towns to not charge the full property tax for new buildings right away for specific areas. So this shows just a diagram of how the property tax could be phased in over a 10-year period in theory. Basically, the idea is that if these taxes wouldn't exist anyways, if people don't want to build in a place because the first year you get taxed in full and you don't even have your commercial tenants yet, well, let's encourage them to build and collect taxes that wouldn't exist otherwise. So it's not just a giveaway, it's creating more tax income. Not my best constructed sentence, but please forgive me. So the third idea is to enable more growth downtown. So currently 3 stories are allowed in the downtown area, or 1 more story if by council approval with the requirement to provide affordable housing or some other public benefit. We did hear from some PAC members that 3 stories is really the maximum for them. That said, we do have these other motivations for wanting to enable growth in the core. 4 stories is also the amount that you can efficiently build with wooden buildings and with local firms. So there's an argument to be made for maybe even these areas where we're trying to encourage growth, maybe 4 stories would be ideal. And under the housing framework, we are supposed to enable more growth. So we need to do something. So the question is, what is that? And as experts in well-being, there's no quantitative cutoff between 3 and 4 stories in terms of people's well-being, in terms of connection with the street, how much people walk outside, things like that. And then we're suggesting, what if we allowed 2 more stories on top of that? So a total of 6 stories in some places, if you provide affordable housing and other public benefits. So these would be exceptional cases, but something we want your feedback on whether we should contemplate. And then we could also potentially grow the commercial zone, core commercial zone, the C1 zone, the downtown zone, to include the rail lands. There's a project underway to consider potential development along there. The area next to the waterfront that I mentioned. Should we consider the area on Seaview and Locust? That is, the streets all terminate within the downtown area, so maybe it makes sense to fold them into the downtown. Or we could extend the downtown eastward. You'll notice that the C2 area is not on this map. We heard feedback that council didn't want a fully downtown style zone for that area, so we're not proposing that. And we'll discuss what we're proposing there in a little bit further down in the presentation. So next is neighborhood scenarios. Please forgive the pace here. We're just running through a lot of ideas. So the goals in the neighborhoods, so this is the R1, R2, R3, R4 areas, is first to encourage more of that gentle density, the missing middle that we're saying Wolfville really needs more of to meet its housing needs. And secondly, to simplify what is a relatively complex zoning map so people more easily understand what their rights are on their property. So in the first scenario, I'm going to run you through 3 scenarios here. The first scenario is the minimum amount of change. So what would happen if we combined R2 and RLD4, so these two, relatively low density zones, and allow a bit more units. So as of right, allowing up to 4 units in R2 areas. And in R1, allowing 2 units instead of 1. So just to show you what that could look like. So for the proposed low density restricted, you could have 2 units, 1 in front, 1 in back. And then in the proposed just normal low density zone, you could have 2 in front, 1 in back, maybe a basement suite, depending on the characteristics of the site. Then in the R3, R4, all of those zones, we keep the same zones and we just marginally increase how much density is allowed there. So, excuse me, for lots that are really, really large lots, we think that we can allow a bit more density. If we're already building like this, idea is let's get a bit more growth out of this, a little bit more impact for revenue and meeting those housing needs. Scenario 2 consolidates the low density residential zones further. So R1, R2, and RLD4 all become a single zone. And this allows 4 units as of right. So again, that is looking like this. So we're saying maybe townhomes in an R1 area is something worth contemplating. And for areas with really large lots, so Wolfville has a lot of these properties with 50-meter width and not much, and just a single family home on it. So we also looked at some options, and this would require a site plan approval. So you'd have to come to council or come to planning staff with a specific analysis justifying why you would have more units. But perhaps we could have townhomes and courtyard housing. Now, I just wanted to share a few examples of what that could look and feel like, because 8 units in an R1 or R2 area can sound scary. But what if it looked like this? What if these are courtyards? This is by far the most social kind of housing. This is a really, really strong approach in terms of building community because people share a common space and they can very easily get to know each other, look after each other's kids, etc. And maybe there are ways of designing townhouses that are appropriate for these residential streets that would reinforce what people love about them. Then on the higher density side, we'd be simplifying a bunch of zones down to just residential medium and residential high density. Here we're proposing quite a large increase in the amount of units allowed by development agreement up to 80 units or 150 units. Again, that's only with council approval. You can see as of right, only 8 units would be allowed in residential medium. So for these larger projects, you really would have to come to planning staff and come to council to get that permission. Then just to show you how much this simplifies things, so this is the current zoning map, and this is what that could look like after the simplification. And then scenario 3 is the, a bit more ambitious. So this would take everything from R1 to R3 and make it one zone, allowing 4 units or up to 16 units per acre by development agreement. And then you'd have medium residential as a second zoning category. Now, I should say that the idea here isn't to allow the maximum allowed amount of density in everywhere in the community, including everywhere that's R1. We're actually suggesting that you create a separate schedule, which is a pretty technical term, but basically a separate map that can restrict height, and density in particular places if there's a specific justification for that. Basically, the idea is instead of having to be stuck with putting all the rules in the zone, maybe we want to allow a certain kind of housing throughout a larger area and use a map that focuses just on height to restrict height in certain places if there's a reason we want to do that. So it gives the town more flexibility, separates those tool regulatory goals into separate tools, basically. Which brings us to neighborhood commercial, where we're suggesting the same thing again. So what we heard from the Planning Advisory Committee is that you want in these residential commercial areas, ideally shops that are included in existing homes that, you know, kind of match the character of neighborhoods. And so we've suggested actually removing the neighborhood commercial zone completely, and instead having a separate schedule, separate map that says neighborhood commercial are allowed in these areas in whatever zone is currently there. So you use the zone to decide the form of the community, what you want to be allowed there. And then you have the commercial schedule to decide where do we want to allow within that form shops and services to open up. And in the action plan in front of you, we have two scenarios for broadly how to approach this. So one is just to focus on key intersections, and the other is to allow commercial along collectors and arterials throughout the town, which should be a little bit broader, plus a few key intersections. And this is what we're suggesting for the area south of downtown, that would become whatever we decide for the residential zones. So let's say maybe medium residential or whatever that might be, and just put a commercial overlay over that. So you're encouraging that residential form and allowing shops and services inside of that. How are we doing? 18 minutes? We're actually doing pretty good. I'm not going to abuse my time too much. So action 2 and best at the end, yeah. So we're also doing a parking review as part of this project. So that's the focus of action 2. Challenges of parking in the community right now are that some spaces on Main Street are used all day. So it's really not an efficient use. You know, people struggle to find parking, and meanwhile, very few cars are actually using those spots. There's missing teeth, so parking lots like this one create gaps between destinations and reduce vibrancy. The parking lots that are there generate little revenue, and parking requirements discourage investments in new businesses and new buildings. So there are parts of town right now where the math of the parking requirements and design requirements means you basically just cannot open a business. It's just not possible. And I don't think that was anyone's goal. So we're going to propose 3 ideas for tackling the parking issue. The first idea is, well, the town has this publicly owned land north of the, I want to say Home Depot. Is that right? Home Hardware? Home Hardware. What if we turn that land into farmland and swapped property with existing farm owners to create parking there on what's currently farmland? And I know the idea of turning farmland into parking is obviously very sensitive. But what if we were able to produce much more farmland in net, and we're able to create a parking lot close to the downtown that would enable the town to redevelop existing parking lots inside the downtown, make better use of them, and have an overflow parking spot that people can go that is within a 3-minute walk of Main Street. So this is one sketch of what those parking lots could look like. And if, for example, if we took the area in front of the library and rebuilt on the parking lot there and next to the liquor store as well, then we could make that public space a much more activated, useful public space. If we had shops on the ground floor there, it would make Elm a better street to walk down. It would better define the edges of this park. And a park is as good as its edges. So if you can put attractive buildings there with restaurants in them, then you could turn this into a much better park, build on the success that the pizza oven is providing and make it even better. Idea 2 is to use revenue from paid parking for a downtown investment fund, which slightly out of order here. What if we implemented paid parking in the town as a way to encourage turnover of those parking spots rather than just having someone sit in a parking lot all day long? We could have a revenue source that could be reinvested in the downtown. We're proposing specifically to take a variable parking rate approach. So instead of just having one set price for parking, on streets where very few people are parking, we decrease the price to encourage more people to park there. On streets that are completely full, we reduce the price with the goal of trying to have about one parking spot available on each street at all times. So it's very, very convenient for customers. And for someone who doesn't want to pay so much, that's okay. You can go one street over or to the proposed new public parking. So there's always options for you, but we're really making more better, efficient use of those parking spots. Then we can pour those funds back into reinvesting in the town. Last time I spoke to you, I mentioned this idea of the valley of neglect, that often cities make big investments when it's every few decades. Well, having a parking fund will provide a consistent source of revenue to reinvest in the downtown. So we did some sketches just to give you a sense of what we think might be possible. So if we reinvested in murals and dining decks and seating and bunting on Central Avenue, then it could become this more inviting connection to Front Street. And this is Harborview. What if we moved the right lane into what's currently a median and use that space as a dining deck, put in flower boxes, invite people down to the trail, invite people down to the waterfront more effectively? The main goal here, though, isn't these specific projects, but actually just getting the business community and residents and council used to the idea of investing in the downtown every year and building that capacity to keep improving it consistently. And then the third idea is to reduce or eliminate parking requirements, at least reduce them so that they're less of a hindrance to people opening up businesses or building new homes. But many communities are eliminating them completely under the logic developers will still build them if they need them, but it gives them flexibility to decide how much a project really does need. Because if you're downtown, maybe you want to appeal to people who are going to walk and bike everywhere, or a certain proportion. The next package you get in this project is going to have a section on non-market housing. So just know that that is coming. There's also going to be a section on Acadia University. And the next steps are engagement. So we're releasing a survey today. So thank you if you can help share that survey. We really look forward to getting the public's feedback. We'll be holding 2 open houses next week and the week after. Dates? 22nd and 26th, thank you. And then we'll be holding, I feel like there's one more piece of engagement that's escaping me, but that's okay. So we'll also put together a what we heard report. Then we'll, as quickly as we can, put together a package 2 with updates saying, here's actually our recommended. So right now we're just throwing out a bunch of ideas. The next package is going to be more clearly, this is what we're recommending. Then staff is going to be working on detailed NPS and land use bylaw changes. There will be, in this next package, as I mentioned, further work on non-market housing in Acadia. And then there will be a further consultation on the final draft documents in the fall. And really the goal is to finish all of this work this year. So thank you very much.
Fast. I know. Great. Thank you for that. I think you did well on time. I didn't time it, but Devin's making
5 minutes over.
Okay. That's pretty good for all that. Questions? Oh, we know. All right. Do we want to start with some questions first? Kelly, I think did you have questions, but you wanted to? Perfect. You want to start?
I had a couple of questions. I made a few notes. I don't know if it's helpful to go back
Sure.
on some
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
slides,
Yeah.
if that's possible.
Yeah.
It was back to where you were looking at expanding the commercial zones and,
Oh, the C1?
yeah.
Sure.
Go back one more slide.
Sure.
Keep going. Keep going. One of these.
Incentivizing development.
No, forward. Must have been this one. Yeah, there, that last circle that popped up. You made a comment that you heard from council that we didn't want that last circle that popped up to be considered for commercial. And I'm just confused by that comment because I'm on council and I don't recall making that decision.
You certainly did. So there was some variation in council feedback,
Uh-huh.
planning committee feedback on that. I didn't mean to say that there would be no commercial there. We're actually proposing that that is a commercial area. During the session that we had at council, there was a lot of folks who were emphasizing, we'd like it to feel like Agricola Street.
Sorry, when was that session?
It was after we spoke. It was in February.
Oh, okay, all right.
There was a desire to have businesses in homes have kind of a residential commercial feel to it rather than the kind of density where downtown where everything is required to be built right up to the sidewalk, for example. So there's actually quite a bit of flexibility right now in terms of what we propose for the form there, because we're proposing to get rid of C2, but there's a few options for what that could be replaced with. So that could be replaced with residential medium, residential high, what depends on what folks want. But we are proposing that that be in the entire area. Right now there's holes in it, but that entire area be marked for neighborhood commercial as a separate schedule that allows shops and services to open up in buildings there.
Okay, I just want to say that I believe a lot of the issues that we have with the expansion of commercial relate to that desire to have a residential feel bridged with commercial, which is how C2 came about initially. And has not been able to be developed because of the restrictions applied to it. So I just would caution that we're just kind of applying that same logic now to a few streets back, and just to be considerate of like that thought was there before, but it didn't really work out the way it was intended to because it was so restrictive. You know, we've essentially just ended up with student housing in C2.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so perhaps over the coming weeks, we could get into the details there and see if there's a scenario that would not be too restrictive.
Okay, great. Okay, and then I was waiting to hear about the commercial pockets, but you addressed that by showing different, that's fine. So I also just think it's interesting that we continue to go back to this concept of having the character homes with shops in them. And it's something that we look at and we think, oh, this looks nice. This is what we want there. But I feel like it adds restriction. Like, I think we need to be thinking, is this what a developer wants to have there? Because as a developer, they might want to come in and do something different. And here we are saying, no, we want an old house with a flower shop in it. I think, again, it's just kind of like that. Whose perspective is it coming from? Like, are we in a position to be mandating what somebody wants to spend $3 million on or $10 million on? Because it's not really us that's developing it. So I just want to say that.
Sure.
And
if I could add one comment.
Yeah.
So one idea that, in this presentation, there wasn't time for, one of the other issues that had come up was how to manage short-term rentals. And
that was on my list too.
okay. So, there was one idea. I mean, it's just an idea, but what if we could financially reward people who open shops in existing buildings? Because there is a cost associated with that, retrofitting an existing building. It's often easier to just demolish and build something new. What if we could reward people who put shops on the ground floor by allowing them to have full-time short-term rentals there? So it's one way to address folks who are asking for more short-term rentals, and also folks who are concerned about if we allow short-term rentals everywhere, then all the time, then that could make our housing situation worse. Well, what if we could use short-term rentals as an incentive to encourage something that some folks are asking for?
Do you want me to give my thought on that?
Please, actually,
I
yes.
feel like it's overly complicated.
Yep.
Like, I think you
There's-
should have a commercial zone and you should be able to put it, whatever business you want in there. That might be short-term rental. And if you want to flip flop between short-term rental and long-term rental, as the owner and investor in that property, you should be able to do it.
Mhm.
So I think.
Okay.
But, what, do you have any estimated annual revenue for the paid parking?
No, we haven't done that work. That's certainly something we can come back and report on.
I really like the idea that you had about reinvesting continuously in the downtown. I think it's like the heart and soul of Wolfville. And I just feel like, you know, the vibrancy of downtown is incredibly important. And so I thought that was great. And then on the parking on the farmland, I've been thinking a bit about that over the last little while, and I feel like it's not so much about taking away the farmland, although that certainly is part of it. And I understand that there is this need for parking long term, but you know, when you're down there in the evening and the sun is setting, or you're down there in the morning and the sun is rising and you're looking out over those fields, like that is just so much of what Wolfville is, that beauty. And if you put a parking lot on that piece of farmland anywhere down there on the dikes, it's destroying that forever. And I feel like I can't ever support that because of those reasons. But that's my feeling on that. So, and then I also wanted to just talk about short-term rentals, because I know that that's somewhere wrapped up in here. As we look at expanding commercial zones and how that would impact the land use bylaws. But I just think that it is such a need and a hot topic in the town with commercial business owners at this moment in the C2 area, that it should be, is it possible to have it like called out as its own action item in this plan somewhere? Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Jen.
Thank you, Mayor McKay. So I'm going to hit on something that was a really hot topic when we approved Maple Avenue. So and maybe this is more of a question for Devin. So 3 stories in the downtown, and then 4 stories by development agreement in the downtown. So what is it if you don't have a development agreement not in the downtown? Because when we approved the 6 stories at Maple Avenue, I was not sure that transferred over when we approved the 6 stories on Gasparo. So I'm a little bit, I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm a little bit confused on the stories. So can you go through that a little bit? Because that's a contentious issue.
So it's kind of an apples and oranges comparison. So the downtown has its own zone. We had a lot of debate over how big buildings could be, only talking about the downtown. And 292 Main Street, honestly, was a big leader in that debate, because we were doing the MPS review when the applicant came in and started talking about that building. So at the time, we were having a very similar conversation that we're having now about 4 stories and 6 stories in the downtown. We didn't go there at the time. We did 3 stories. We then did a completely separate process in the East End and created new zoning. And so for that zoning, it has its own rules and regulations separate from the downtown. And over in the East End, there's 2 different types of height requirements. One is a 4-story kind of maximum, and one is a 6-story maximum. So part of your confusion that I'm hearing is a big part of the exercise that we're trying to do here, which is we've layered over 25, 30 years. The town only started doing zoning in the 70s. And so we've layered many, many rules on top of rules in different areas of town and got really microscopic about how we look at different things. And I hear the same kind of comment from Kelly, just that it should be more clear. And so we're really,
Clear, then that's why I asked it,
Absolutely.
because I mean, just for an example, over on Maple Avenue, we did approve the 6 stories, but right now there's a 4-story building being built. So that encompasses everything on 6 stories. So there could potentially be another 6-story building in there, or no, because that was built on sort of,
there's only one small area in where you're discussing and in the new area, Kenny Crescent, I guess it's called now, that allows 6 stories. So it's just the area at the top of the hill. The area at the bottom has a few lots that allow up to 4 stories, and the rest of it just allows townhomes.
and that's because it's a development agreement, right? So if it wasn't a development agreement, would it would not be?
It's
I just get asked these questions all the time and I can't really answer them properly, I guess. Maybe, I don't know if I'm just confused and I need a
So-
one-on-one.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a confusing labyrinth of rules, and that's what I'm trying to get at is, so it's not a development agreement. It was a secondary plan and a zoning that we applied over there. And interestingly, the reason that we did that is because development agreements have been so challenging to deal with, both administratively and I think politically, and for people in the community. It's just been a really bad expectations management exercise. So we did that process very intentionally, like we did, and it establishes what you can do on all those lots. And really, it's just zones in the land use bylaw, and they say what you can do. A development agreement is really just a custom land use bylaw on one single property. So 292 Main Street, development agreement. All of the area in the East End is zoned, essentially. We did a process to zone it, but it's just in our land use bylaw and they can proceed. There are scenarios that they could apply for a development agreement over there as well. Yeah.
Maybe
Can I
I'm
just
just
ask
getting
you-
too technical or something.
Well, no, I think it speaks to just some of the education that we need to do as well.
Did you have an
I just
addition?
wanted to ask a clarifying question about what Councilor Ingham asked. If somebody wanted to build 6 stories outside of the East End development, now that that zone exists, could they come in and apply for a development agreement for a 6-story building somewhere else in town?
No, they could apply to rezone their property to that.
They rezoned their property,
Yep.
then they could build 6 stories on it.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that is what happened on Gasbro Avenue in Highland. And so we've created a container, let's call it, to accept investment and proposals for buildings of a certain size. That's what the zoning does. Development agreements where, yeah, you might be able to do this or this, up to really an undefined size often. And they would come in and we would go through this iterative process back and forth. So the intent was just really clear expectations with the zoning.
Thank you. First of all, from my recollection as a kid, the parking meters downtown were taken out because management of the town at the time thought that they were driving people to New Minas. You didn't have to pay for parking at towers, for example. That's then, this is now. I want to thank Tristan for pulling as much as he has together. One phrase that jumped out at me was prioritizing public interest. And I really like that because I think often what we're talking about is making developers happy. And public interest is a whole other thing. This morning I was watching CBC, and the city of Dartmouth is looking at a brand new heritage conservation district. And I thought back to how this is so typical of me. We've talked a lot about built heritage, and I've especially talked about it, and we haven't done a whole lot. So in 2015, there was some consultation around protecting view planes and protecting cultural heritage, or whatever you want to call it. But in January 2016, repealed the heritage property bylaw and merged the two groups into this one. In 2019, the Historical Society was interested in some discussion, creating some discussion about a heritage master plan. That hasn't happened. And I feel like a lot of these discussions would go better if that kind of framework existed. Certainly other towns have them. They protect, historic facades or whatever is deemed by the community to be important. And I feel like we're looking at all these growth issues in the lens of a developer and not in what the public interest is. So I just wanted to say that.
You do have a comment?
I was just going to say that I think we can add a lot more to speak to what I think is at the core of where you're going with that, Wendy. And I've been involved in a lot of those discussions. So I just wrote down, I think in the next package, we can really expand on addressing it, because it is every proposal I've worked on, it's a huge issue. We always have that coming to the table. And I think we need to maybe meet it a little more head on and talk about the trade-offs that exist, because it's not a perfect needle that we can thread on the heritage discussion. So I think we can illuminate those and maybe just show what the decision points are and how they can be affected.
If I can add, any ideas specifically on how to tackle heritage? The next few weeks would be a really valuable time to give that input.
Well, I will say that I went into Lunenburg last week, into the town hall, marched right in. They have a heritage planner, Laura, and she was happy to sit down with me and show me the list of what they're prioritizing. And I'm sure in every community it would be different, but that's maybe some place to start, even though it's UNESCO preserved.
You're a journalist, I'm sure you can find some things.
I would just add that thank you, Tristan, for the presentation, and just for your information here. Tristan and I had a good discussion about heritage in part of my comments on when he was doing the one-on-one interviews, because I'm trying to wear my hat on this committee. And so I did provide Tristan with a fairly long email with a lot of links to all of our built heritage properties, our 3 National Historic Sites, our designated properties. And we had some good ideas, and I do see some of them reflected today. So, but to Wendy's point, I would agree that at somewhere down the road, as part of our planning work, to have either a built heritage strategy, or some towns and cities have a strategy that encompasses art, culture, and heritage. So it's looking at the 3 facets of that community well-being. Maybe while I have the mic, Madam Mayor, I just mention one of the things that Tristan and I talked about, and I don't see it necessarily reflected here, Tristan, but when we were talking about parking, it came up into my mind. We were talking about the town compound, which is near the Public Works compound, which is like right next to the Home Hardware, which is really in prime territory. And from my national parks experience, I said to Tristan, that's like putting the compound like at the front gate. And typically what you're trying to do is take that kind of infrastructure, asset management side of things and tuck it somewhere where it's not necessarily as in high of a public good place. So I wondered in the context of, we talked about it as, would there be a possibility, because it is town-owned property, that the town has a longer term strategy to eventually move the Quonset hut, and there is the office building there, but there is all of the equipment and all that stuff, that there would be an opportunity to reuse that land because it's contiguous with the farmer's market, and it does take you out to that wonderful view plane of the dike. So we talked about that either becoming a public good space. You could keep the office building, but all of that equipment area could be repurposed. The other part of it, which wouldn't be quite as good as a public park, could be parking. I was just looking at it on Google Maps, and in terms of its size and context, to Kelly's point about, well, gee, you know, we don't necessarily want to stick a parking lot on the dike land, but you could probably find almost as many spaces if you moved the, you know, the equipment shed and all that stuff. So that probably will come up in some of the public consultation too, I would imagine. But anyway, I just thought I would mention it here because I think it's worth, because the town has responsibility for that land, and it is really front and center with where we're talking about redevelopment.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I really valued that idea, and I want you to know that we had some fun discussions about that. And I'll just explain where we landed. So we explored the idea, what if, you know, in the future, the home hardware could be more of a urban home hardware that where you can buy a hammer, but maybe not, you know, 12 feet of plywood. You know, there's other places where you could have that more industrial scale, you know, woodlot. And if the city owned land, you know, there was other places you could put those utilities, the places for the, you know, the public works shed, etc. And you could redevelop that area and turn this into a node, you know, an extension of the downtown. So it's a fun exercise to think through. And it, you know, and of course it has that incredible view here of the farms. And the motivation for this current map is that we really heard that the priority for the Planning Advisory Committee was to bring life to Front Street and to make Elm a nicer street to walk down, so, and also potentially growth near the waterfront. So these are the areas in the near term where we have the potential to fill in missing teeth, you know, take action now. This felt more like a longer term concept to maybe think about down the road, but, you know, very stimulating to think about. We did propose extending it slightly along Elm Street, the C1 area, to try to fill in some of these gaps here and take the quality of that street where you have shops on both sides a little bit further. In terms of, this is a parking lot, we thank you for the suggestion and we'll include that.
Yes, Mike,
I also like to say thanks to Tristan. For the
your mic's off. It just went off on you. There you go.
Okay. Thanks, Tristan, for the presentation and the information. It's quite thorough. One of the questions I have, and kind of maybe loops on to what you were just saying, is a little bit about timelines. And I talk to neighbors and I will encourage them to do surveys and come out to meetings and things like that. The question I always get when I start talking about this kind of stuff, well, when is this happening? How long will it take? And all I can say is, well, it's going to be a long time, but I just wonder if there's any kind of best ideas about how long we're looking at. And the other piece of that is we've got different, like we've got a parking thing, we've got a downtown, which comes first? So is there, like, as we're looking at rolling things out over time, I assume you don't build parking first. I just wonder what the list is as far as what comes first, then second, third kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up the point about, you know, how quickly will change happen. It is something that in the action plan we really tried to emphasize, which is that, you know, in no scenario is everything that's going to be proposed here will be built all at once. You know, Wolfville is going to continue to grow at an incremental pace. The short-term projections are suggesting that the pace is actually going to slow a little bit over the next few years. You know, we're hoping to use tools that we described to incentivize development. And some of these lots here, there's already some discussion about making something happen there. But, you know, some of these lots, like behind the grocery store, I mean, it could be a long, long time before that's redeveloped. So the goal will be to encourage what is possible over the next 5 to 10 years, but recognizing that the pace of change is going to be incremental. Now, in terms of phasing the implementation of parking actions, we haven't made any decisions about that because we're still taking feedback on, you know, what we should be moving forward with.
Yes, just to build on parking, since we're talking about it, and to respond to Wendy's question, like if we have meters, they're going to go up to minus. So Devin, maybe you will know this, maybe Jody or Wendy, who's been living in Wolfville for a while. Was there not in the all-day parking at one point, did they not, you not have to have a pass and pay for it? And we don't have that anymore. So I'm just thinking that would be a way to generate, like if somebody's coming, because Acadia obviously has that at the ATF and the athletics complex, right? And other places. So to not have to do a meter, like, so if you're going to be working all day, you're going to be staying there all day. I don't know. We don't have that anymore, but we used to, didn't we? Am I correct?
There was like a colored,
There was a
colored
sticker or
system.
something, but did you have
Sticker.
to pay for it?
I can't remember if I don't think there was formal paid sections of that. No.
I don't remember that.
That was in the early 2000s, I think.
I remember having to have a pass. I remember having to have a pass, and I don't know. I'm looking at Wendy because, well.
We haven't
you
had
live-
formal paid parking since
Yeah,
the meeting that Wendy's discussing. That wasn't a paid system.
that wasn't a paid system.
Not that I know of, no.
Something to consider.
So I just wanted to make one note about the concern about people driving further to New Minas due to the paid parking. I just wanted to note that that was one motivation for having abundant public parking somewhere, so that they would be motivated to drive 30 seconds further, park there, and then they get the free parking that they want. But it allows us to use the parking on somewhere like Main Street more efficiently.
Is anyone, Wendy, I'm just going to check in online. Is anyone online have a question? I can't see them, so sorry.
I have lots of things going through my mind. I will try and make it make sense. In relation to the whole parking question, and in my mind, when there was talk about parking study, I was actually thinking traffic study, because my underlying question still around parking is, why are we bringing all the cars downtown? And the thought of putting a big new parking lot on the Dykelands, to me, is horrific. I'm feeling like, okay, so who is the parking for? Is it for residents? Is it for tourists? If it's for tourists, why aren't we working around the edges of the town and looking at park and ride, or parking at the wineries and then getting on the bus and going around, and the bus keeps on going till later in the evenings for the community? If it's for residents, if we're going to look at changing the parking requirements, maybe we don't, I'm going to say the bigger buildings, because I think that's sometimes where the challenge for developers is. Maybe as a town, we should be looking at the town partnering with a car share company, and every multi-unit dwelling has a car share or two located in the building that the developer also contributes to. But it's changing this idea that everyone needs a car to come downtown, which also then speaks to having the commercial opportunities other places than everything just downtown. Because for many residents, they may be able, they'd like their doctor or their dentist or to be able to get some groceries or whatever it is without having to go downtown because it's busy with tourists. So if we look at the other types of zoning, I always think about the Skyway Pleasant Strip, especially recognizing that there are going to be big developments up at the top of the hill there. And maybe we haven't even talked about the top of West End, where there could be some 5 or 6 story potential units up there. So, and then there's the whole piece about let's improve parking, public transit, micro transit. And when we talk about improving the streetscape, I want to make sure we've got great sidewalks or active transportation routes so that everyone can actually move around the community at all times of the year without having to get out and into their car. So that's one piece that's going through my head. Another piece that I think about at the beginning, Tristan, you said something about the bit we're missing is the missing middle, and you showed a graph, I think, that showed that most of the houses with either one or apartment buildings. And yet I feel when you briefly talked about the neighborhood residential scenarios, the emphasis was on higher height, more units per building, which are apartments, which are then actually not doing or addressing the missing middle. So that was something that struck me. And this is a very specific question. Again, it's around the tables to do with the neighborhood zones. In some places, it talks about UPA, and which I believe means units per acre. And in other places, it talks about number of units. And is there a way that we can either use one or the other? And I'm just going to refer to Maple Avenue, where they are building a 4-story building right now. That is on a 1 acre piece of land, and it's 48 units. So if I understand it roughly, I may not be quite correct, but the density then, or the UPA, is going to be plus more than 40. It's about the same number of units. And I just find that confusing, and maybe I don't understand it correctly. So maybe I'll just leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, on that last point, one of the goals here in simplifying the zoning is to use the same metrics in each zone rather than having different ways of measuring that. So that simplification is a goal here. And thank you so much for asking about why so much of an emphasis on apartments. I really wouldn't want to leave you with that impression because so on this map this is scenario 2 where the R1 and R2 are combined, and then there's a separate medium density zone. So in all of the light beige here, this would be allowing just 4 units as of right. And in the light beige and the darker beige, which is medium density, you'd be allowed up to 8 units as of right. And the goal there being on most of these smaller lots, that you would be allowed to do something like, courtyard housing or townhouses or a mix of, a house in front and another house in back. Whether the larger apartment units would be more on the larger parcels, and they would have to, you'd have to do a site plan. You'd have to, in some cases, do a development agreement if you wanted to be especially large. So there'd be more process there, and it would be only for parcels that meet whatever requirements there are for that. So the intention of this plan really is to encourage more of that missing middle, that ground-oriented type of housing. And by saying missing middle, it's also more compact. So instead of just saying 1 unit on a property, allowing 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the context.
Thank you. Jason? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Devin. Sorry.
So, Caroline, there is a bit of information about traffic at the back of the report. I do.
Yes, I did see that.
Doing a more detailed study is something that we're kicking off. I actually have a meeting in a few days about that, looking at the corridor between Gasbro and University, but also looking in talking to the folks there may be discussions about the 101 that council should consider in the next 5 years, and should consider other options. But I do think the physical constraints of the town will present challenges. And again, it's one of these trade-off discussions that I think we just need to be honest with what the trade-offs are, what the costs are, and move forward, with the best information that we have. So what you have in there, I think, does speak to all of the points that you made. It's just some of it is work to come.
Okay, yeah, and may I just respond, follow up there, Mayor McKay?
Sure.
I did also notice that the higher 101 interchange had reappeared. And I think some of it is around ultimately prioritizing public interest. And so is the public interest that we want a town, because I feel we have 2 access points to the highway now. We come in either from Gas Row, or we come in from Wolfville, or we can go along Ridge Road if we want to. I would be, and if we can address traffic by encouraging people to change the way they move around town, maybe we don't need another access point to the highway, and maybe I'll be in the minority, and maybe that's the way the town will go. But again, there are 2 options suggested, yeah, I have concerns about revisiting that, and I think I would like to see us or the town, if there's interest, to approach it on changing the culture of the town rather than staying car driven. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Jason, do you have any questions?
Lots of questions. I just wanted to say a couple of things further to Caroline's point. I don't know if it's quality to say this, but has there been any exploration into improving public transportation in the area? I guess that would go along with car share options. It seems like in this day and age to be building parking lots everywhere is maybe not going in the right direction.
I guess the short answer is yes. Yeah. There has been discussion at council, and I know that this particular council is quite interested in exploring investing in something Wolfville centric, microtransit, small vans or small buses going around town.
Yeah.
You have another question?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, you have your...
Yes. I know we're kind of outside of Tristan's territory because he's looking at the downtown, but I saw the image that you used of the parking lot by the waterfront park, and discussion of restaurants and outdoor eating areas, and I'm like, I have a clicker going on in my brain going, climate change. I know that the house at the very end by the tree has been for sale several times, and it's because it's in a flood zone. So can you encourage people to put restaurants there?
I think part of the information that we're bringing back to you is new dike elevations from Department of Agriculture that we didn't have before. So we were working through a process with them. They've been on the design side probably 6 years, and they've advanced their project to about 60% design. They are looking at, in some sections, a meter and a half of. But people are using this word public interest. I mean, at the end of the day, what we are doing in this exercise is deciding what we believe is in the public interest, including issues about where we feel buildings should be placed for the very long term. I have no doubt that will come when we have more detailed discussion about that area. I think from my perspective and what I've seen in the mapping and the modeling that we've done, certainly at the staff level, there'll be some encouragement of development in the downtown because the difference between this area and just down in the downtown is not much. It's really similar.
But Devin, I know about the dikes and I know they're being topped, but around the harbor, I don't recall a discussion.
We've done a bunch of geotechnical work and we're aligning our elevations, and so in the town's capital budget there is an item for topping the waterfront. Yeah, and so that's been in the capital budget for a number of years. It's moved around. I don't know what year it's in right now. I actually think it's in the next couple of years, but we're trying to execute that when there's all of the material that Department of Agriculture is bringing in. So we're now using their consultant. I was just at Waterfront Park. We have surveyors down there doing topographic survey right now. So we are looking at it as well.
Any further questions or comments for Tristan?
Just one other comment. Kristen, when you were talking about changing R1 to R2 and like doing, and let's all face it, like that's as we say, the elephant in the room or the moose under the table. I think when we get to public engagement and next week, it's going to be important to be able to explain how that could work. You mentioned going from R1 to R2, for example, you said, depending on the characteristics of the site, you could have a second dwelling where you would now only be allowed to have one dwelling. And so, yeah, in the chart, we talk about number of units and the difference in the type of rights, as of right or site plan, but the characteristics, I think, is going to be important for people to understand. Even in my own sort of limited understanding of, I know what as of right means, but when I look on my own street and I live on a court and there is, it's R1 restricted, and there is a house that pretty much takes up the whole lot currently. Like not everybody has really huge lots in R1 restricted. And so, when we talk about going from R1 to R2, my understanding usually has always been, okay, it would be a secondary dwelling, like within the house, like you wouldn't necessarily be building a second building, although we do see that happening. So I'm assuming that if we were going into second building, that those characteristics that you talked about there would be certain amounts of minimum frontage, minimum space, the same kind of things we see in bylaws. But I'm thinking that when we talk about the prickly points and getting ready to speak to the public next week, it'd be important for at least some of us that are going to be there to try to promulgate these ideas to understand a bit more.
We included a small nod to really what's at the core of that, which is a lot of lots will not accommodate another unit unless it's in the existing dwelling. And I was on the phone with someone earlier today actually talking about trying to service a separate building on their property. And I have an idea of how much it costs to service things. And when I mentioned to them, they sort of laughed, and that they're not doing that. They're not even going to look into it. But they may be able to convert their basement into a unit. This isn't in an R1 area that I'm discussing, but a very high percentage of properties, just because of the lot characteristics, will not be able to easily add units. Now, for enough investment, you can probably figure it out, but I would say for most people, that's just not going to be possible. Especially I know where your home is, and I know where I used to live in an R1 zone. A lot of the lots are almost fully built out now, and there's just not a lot of space. And so I think it's really challenging.
Well, and I think that's an important message that you just had. I think it will help counselors as well to, to sort of bring the din of this down if we end up going there.
And we could even do this type of scenario and show sort of the other side of it. This is a really proactive side. We could show, hey, here's a ton of properties that really have limited opportunity without a lot of cost.
Yeah, and I think it's lot size, and I also think it's services and the way it lands, because if, you know, my backyard is a swimming pool half of the year because the way the drains, like, I couldn't build anything there if I wanted to. And you know, there's no sidewalk and like all of those other things, like, and if you doubled the population on my street, that's not a through street, it would be atrocious. It also has no pavement, but that's okay. Devin caught that. Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's lots of things that you kind of have to, you know, if you just go in with a carte blanche statement that you turn everything from R1 to R4, we'd probably ruffle some feathers.
Can I add one thing to that? I do think the whole idea of in the R1 zone where there are larger homes, maybe older homes that may currently be lived in by older residents, they might very much welcome. It may not be creating a basement suite. It may be actually dividing it horizontally. So the upstairs is one unit, and it might be someone who would then enable a senior to continue living in the lower part, and they, you know, help one another out, and maybe other than a front door or you know, some regulations that nothing would change from the outside. And I think that would be an important message to people in the town. Having, you know, in different communities, you don't always know. They look like a single family home, but they're in fact, they could be 2 or 3 units within the envelope that looks like a single family home.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Thank you for the presentation. I think somewhere in between all of this, there's probably a happy medium and a balance of all of the things, but I'm not sure what they all are right now, but it'll be interesting to do our engagement sessions over the next couple of weeks, I guess, and hear what people have to say. Thank you. Next thing on our agenda is the update on our upcoming community engagement. Devin, I'm assuming that is you.
We basically did that.
Yeah.
That was part of the presentation. We've sent
dates.
invites, and there's advertising going out, social media, posters going out.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Wonderful. And now it's time for a round table. I'm not sure if anyone has anything else, but Mike, good.
I just have a question about that community engagement, and I just wonder what our role as this committee is at those meetings if we're there. I know when we did the East End consultation, we were in the room and people were coming up and asking us questions, and we were sort of taking notes and contributing. So I'm just curious what's my role if when I'm at those meetings next week?
Sure. Dr. Lake?
You're obviously welcome to come, and you should talk to people and let them know who you are. We do have quite a big team working on this project, so we didn't, it's not that it's a burden, but you're also a volunteer effort here. And so we have a project budget and different deliverables and things that are being executed through this. So I think the team will take the weight of that, and we would encourage you to come and do what you feel comfortable with. I know some people, I didn't get the sense that everyone was as comfortable. I also was doing that process in a different environment. So yeah.
It's certainly welcome to go listen, and I plan on going and listening. I'd like to hear exactly what people say sometimes, but so that's just a preference. But so do whatever everyone's available and comfortable doing.
Yeah, I would
So would-
say, sorry, Carolyn, I would say the last time we did this, I was there as well, and I thought it was really useful. We had name tags, and I think we were able to move a few things to help the counselors. And then I remember a debrief after, and people had different perspectives. So, yeah.
Caroline, did you have a question?
Well, just I hope to come to some of the sessions because I think it would be really helpful. But will it be like you had last time you had stations and you had questions and people moved around? Is that the hope for this time?
That's the general idea. It'll be similar by topic that we've presented in the framework.
Great.
So let's do a roundtable. Wendy, do you have anything you want to bring up? And especially, thank you. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. Kelly? Jason?
Nope, I'm good.
Caroline?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for that. So our next meeting is June the 12th. We'll have our engagement sessions before that, so we'll probably see you there from 6:30 to 8:30. Motion to adjourn. Thank you. We are adjourned.